Alright guys, hope to come back again today. Hope you're all doing well and enjoying your day so far. Just as the game is about to release, it appears we finally have some reasonable confirmation of an actual 12-team league going into next season with a brand new roster linked to the Los Angeles Guerrillas. Jake Hell says that this team is not yet necessarily confirmed. There could be changes going forwards, but to be honest, looking at the rest of the teams, this isn't actually too bad. Lots of other roster chaos going on today, loads to get into. Very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comments below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always, I greatly appreciate it. Firstly, this is from Overactive Media. Big story yesterday, confirmed its exit from the Overwatch League. This has been known for some time, that the OWL basically saying, alright guys, take $6 million and disappear, we'll call it a day. Now Overactive Media, they own Toronto Defiant in the Overwatch League and Toronto Ultra in the Call of Duty League. They do clarify though, that they have a continued commitment to esports, despite the fact that it is now known that the Overwatch League is transitioning from the OWL and evolving competitive Overwatch in a new direction. So this is kind of what we want to hear, as far as they're not saying, all right, the Overwatch League is done and dusted and that's it. And Jacob Wolf does go on to say actually here in this tweet that, yeah, OAM are done and dusted, but I believe some, such as the Defiant, maybe like the Shock and some others in the Overwatch League, will remain a part of Overwatch esports, but many of the franchises will be done for good. And that's what I wonder when this happens to the Call of Duty League, which it will, I would say. It's just a matter of time. Which of the current franchises will actually stay around? I don't think that matters that much, because if the franchises, whichever franchises don't decide to stay in whatever comes next after the Overwatch League or whatever, maybe it's the CWL again, we'll see what they come up with over time. Some sort of open circuit style format. Whatever teams don't take that up, other organizations will replace them, as we've seen in Call of Duty past. But which ones will stay? I think the big ones certainly will, like OpTic, FaZe, Thieves, like they're going to stay around after. I would say Toronto will as well. I'd say New York will. The ones that are financially committed and have actually tried, like, okay, they might not be called the New York Subliners, whatever they've got, NYXL or whatever the thing is that they do. I think it used to be Andbox, didn't it? I don't know if that's really a brand anymore. I know that London or Carolina now had Rogue was one of their brands, so and Minnesota have like version 1, so it's quite possible that a lot of these teams will still want to be in Call of Duty esports, but just not part of the CDL. But some of these organizations, the ones that haven't necessarily financially committed much, I imagine will be, well, they'll be done as soon as they possibly can, including Los Angeles Guerrillas. We'll get to them in a second. Firstly, as a few of you guys pointed out to me last night on, well, Pred's story on Instagram, he was at the Champions League game with, so it was Arsenal-Sevilla last night at the Emirates. This, of course, in London. And, well, here we are, Pred at the game yesterday. Pretty interesting, of course. Like, we knew full well that Pred is not getting to the States quite yet. But, okay, I guess he's still got a day. We think that there's visa stuff going on. I imagine he's in London for some sort of appointment. You know, quite often this is the case if you've got to do visa stuff. London, a lot of the time, that's the place that you've got to end up going to. So maybe that's what's happening with Pred, and he's in London right now to try and get something sorted before he can then fly out to the States ASAP. But, yeah, confirming it seems that he's not going to be there yet. We know that Scump has commented on this over the last few days and said, well, yeah, if the team needs me to sub in, that might be a necessity when the season starts. Let's talk rosters then. Lots going on in challenges. This is pretty funny. Parasite was meant to team with Thresh, Shotzzy, and Dimensions. Apparently, yeah, potentially a pretty good trio down there. That was meant to be his team, certainly a team of all time. And then just a couple of hours later, apparently Parasite's decided, you know what, I'm going to focus on content. So this is the thing, and now those guys are looking for one. So it's kind of funny. Parasite always says that he's going to come back and he's going to commit, and then he apparently has said, actually, no, I'm not going to do that. Let's just do content for the start of the game. But then again, playing in challenges, scrimming, this type of stuff, playing in the tournaments is also very good content. So we'll see. I wouldn't be surprised if give it a couple of weeks, Parasite says, actually, you know what, yeah, get me a team and I'll run it up in the first part of challenges as usual. So he was actually on the Crowd analysis here of the current challenger rosters, but as he says with the asterisks, these are very much subject to change, and they will very much change. And the funny thing is that very shortly after a lot of this, they did change, because this team, Asim, Gunless, Gravity, and Crimp, well, something interesting has happened to that, because Gravity now says outright, he said this on Twitter yesterday, he's now a free agent, and that probably means that these three guys are going a different way. Look at the amount of talent here in challenges. It's actually quite unbelievable. And look, we have a 12-team CDL. It's only 4 versus 4. There is, I'm sure, hope among many of these players that when the CDL goes away or whatever comes next, we could go back to 16 teams, and of course the open circuits, those players will have more chance to compete at the majors just like they used to. That's the ideal case. I mean, look at just the amount of names here and players that have won events or been in the Pro League for years, world champions even in the likes of Assault, and now down here in Challenges. Priestahh, of course, world champion, Sensor, national champion back in 2011 or whatever it was, of course, Parasite, but we mentioned that not long ago. So these are some of the teams in North America, crazy stacked. And then Europe, of course, we have this team of Bance, Hixie, Nasty, and Beans, which is just unbelievably good compared to what you might expect. And we'll get onto the Beans thing in a second. As Method says, though, this is actually disturbing to see that much talent in Challenges, but I'm sure many of these players might get their chance in the Pro League, as some of them already have, as we'll get into. Now, firstly, Beans. This was an interesting story this offseason because Beans, we're pretty sure, was on a 2-year deal with Boston. They decided to keep him when the off-season, began. They didn't drop him like they did pretty much the rest of their team. So we thought, all right, maybe he's going to be their sub for the new year. But then he was recently linked, as we just saw, to the Hixie, Nasty, Bance team in Europe. So we're like, how does that make any sense for him to play European challenges but be the Boston sub? It doesn't really add up. And therefore, they confirmed yesterday that Beans is gone. Of course, here from Dens, their general manager, talking about their decision-making and how they've got to their current decision. But it's difficult for Beans in the sense that if he was dropped immediately when the season ended, then maybe he could have actually joined a Pro League team. I don't know, maybe a team wouldn't have signed him, but maybe there was more opportunity if he was immediately a free agent, unrestricted free agent, whereas because he was signed to them still, he was restricted and no one was going to buy him out of a contract with all the other talent available for months. I definitely think Beans, I know that people are clowning him this year sometimes. I think this guy showed a lot of promise and is probably only a couple of tweaks away from being a real top-level player, I would say. So I think, honestly, Beans would be a great target for CDL teams at some point. I think that when he does get his next shots, which I think that he will at some point, that might kind of solidify himself, because I think he's definitely got the talent on the evidence we saw on Boston this last year, but the team's decided to move in a different direction, and now he's down in Challenges with many other great players, such as these 4 guys, but apparently they're now going to be in the CDL. So the rotation say as of yesterday, these are the 4 players linked to the Los Angeles Guerrillas. Quite a lot of this makes a fair bit of sense because we saw the other day rumours that they would just sign players they'd had on their radar before, either had played for their starting team or for their academy, and most of these guys fit the bill on that one. So the rumoured team is Diamond Con, you guys probably remember from the New York Subliners days when he was on that team at the start of Cold War, Gunless, aSeam, who were there very recently, right, during the Vanguard year, and then Kremp, who had a great rookie little stint, I would say, at least from a slaying perspective, this past season on the Boston Breach. That is apparently going to be the Los Angeles Guerrillas squad. As we say, Gravity was meant to team with these 3 guys, but without Diamond Con, and then Gravity all of a sudden is now, a free agent looking for another team, and he'll get another team, sure, you know how it goes down there, but Diamond Con's going to come in. So what do you guys think about this squad compared to some of the other teams that have been formed around? Jake Hell does say that as far as he's concerned, this is not necessarily for sure. Like, there's still some possibilities for change here. I heard something along these lines as well as some other possible names. That said, being LAG, being the way they are right now, I'm not believing anything until I see them load in. To my knowledge, this isn't set in stone by any means, and I wouldn't be surprised if none of the contracts are signed yet. I mean, let's be honest. As I said the other day, there's probably a deadline very soon, shortly after the game release, where they actually have to say to the league, right, this is going to be our roster, and these guys have been signed. There's got to be something like that at some point. And now they have to lock in. At least they're locking in, because I didn't know what we were going to do with an 11-team league. It probably would have been okay for the qualifiers. We'd have found a way around it. But for the majors, the only best way to do it is to have some sort of challengers qualifier where you bring up the best challenger team, or you just kind of force LAG to field that best challenger team. I don't even know at that point. But would the CDL execute that? Would they want to execute that? It would be logistically challenging, and we know that the CDL right now is trying to, budget themselves through to whatever comes afterwards, and therefore that's not really on the top of their agenda to make stuff like that happen if they can avoid it. So it seems like Guerrillas are being forced into fielding a team. They clearly want to go, but who is going to buy their spot right now? It doesn't make any sense. Why am I going to pay how many million for a spot that's going to be worth 0 in about 12 months? A couple of you guys were also pointing this out to me. You guys might remember the beef between Gunless and Beans at the time, and there was all sorts of stuff happening. And of course, maybe now it's going to be roles reversed in the sense of Beans down to challenges and Gunless up to the CDL. good to see Gunless get a shot again because great player in his prime. Since he had the illness and he was out of Los Angeles, Guerrillas, Spart subbed in. They won that event, right, with, Spart and Slasher and Hook and Asim back at the Major 2 event during the Vanguard season. After which point, Gunless has struggled to get back into the CDL despite being a phenomenal player. And, so cool to see him back. Diamondcon had a decent stint a couple of years ago. Kremp had showed a lot of promise in the most recent season. So, to be honest, I kind of like this team. The roles make a bit of sense, Gunless, I guess, can be the flex. Diamondcon can be on the main AR. Kremp and Asim on the SMGs. Potentially a decent mix there of objective work and slaying. It's not on paper, and it's not a terrible team, on paper. Are these boys going to be making the World Championship? I'm not so convinced, but at least they're doing something, I suppose. Now, before we close out the video, let's dive into the top 10 through top 6 players on the Breaking Point rankings that came through yesterday. Again, everything's controversial. I think what I tend to find is that when you look at the Reddit posts on this, everyone in the comments is moaning about where these people are placed. And, obviously people are going to have their own opinions. I think in general, people that kind of agree and think, that's fair enough, they're probably not likely to comment on Reddit and say, oh yeah, that's reasonable enough. It's the people that think that it's outrageous that are more likely to comment, I suppose, anyway. So Simp gets number 10. I think this is about right. I know some people thought maybe he should be a little bit lower. I think that this is justified solely on his phenomenal S&D performances on LAN. It's interesting that Simp, after going from being, potential future GOAT or, great player, top 3, top 1, top 2 for the last several years, now in the top 10 range, struggling to get into the top 10. But I think his great search and destroy on LAN that was super crucial to FaZe having the results they did this year, the average placings and the championship they won, is a deciding factor for me. But I think even on my list, I had Simp a little bit lower down even. Now, Drazah gets number 9. I think, again, this is about right. I thought he was great for the Los Angeles Thieves. Incredibly good, honestly, given the role that he was running. Search and Destroy especially was right up there. And, I think that's about right as well. Now, we get on to number 8, and this is where things get pretty controversial when you start to talk about more OpTic players. Again, I think most people would maybe agree that Dashy's in a reasonable spot here. Had a good season, for sure, for Dashy's standards. Okay, not quite at the top of his game, but at the same time, as far as I'm concerned, when I do these rankings, results do count more than KD, and everyone's going to have their different perception on that, and we'll talk about that with Pred here in just a second, because that was a big talking point of last night. But look, you made a couple of finals, didn't win an event. I think you're always going to be capped at a certain level of ceiling in terms of the rankings. Dashy at number 8 I thought was justified, because Octane was at number 7, and you can say that, well, maybe Skyz should be higher than Dashy or whatever, in and around that ballpark, like 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, like, it's difficult to say, but I think that Octane number 7 is also fair enough. I mean, again, it's Search and Destroy. Man, if Octane was good at Search, can you imagine like how unbelievable this guy would have been? But the impact he had this year on Thieves was undeniable. The comms, everything. He won an event, so I think that that's probably true as well. And then we get Pred at number 6, and this was probably the most controversial because his numbers this year, given his role, were outrageously good, really. Especially his Search and Destroy. I mean, his Search numbers, his First Blood numbers, absolutely insane. And, there's a lot of people I saw commenting that said that Pred should have been number 2, basically the best player in the world, apart from HyDra, because I think we can safely predict who's going to be number 1 on this list. For me, doing these rankings, I put Pred around about 6. I think I might even put him slightly lower because, okay, he made a finals at the first event of the season, but for me, the placings mean more than the numbers do. And if you didn't win an event or make many finals, 6 is like your cap. I think 5 and above, 5 to 1 are players that have to have won something. So yeah, anyway, that's my opinion. Doesn't mean that Pred wasn't phenomenal, because he was, but there has to be some weighting for LAN placings and performances in this list, because if there isn't, then it's literally just a list of the best KD players and it's just all stats. I think people look at this and they get way too stats orientated than they should around these things. But intrigued to your perspective in the comments below. Maybe you think we're faded. Hit the like button if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new. Take care, and I'll see you next time.